After Mugabe had taken over Zimbabwe, and going back to 1981 to 1987, that was the Gukurahundi era, where Mugabe had the 5th Brigade killing everyone. The killing scene was perhaps at its highest, and the Midlands area was very, very serious, as well as the Bulawayo area. Now, what actually happened at that time is that a lot of the farmers that had milking machines in areas such as Featherstone, the Mashwingu area, the Gweru area, and also the Bulawayo area, there was a lot of killing, there was curfews, no-go areas, and so on. The actual stress and the trauma, the whites were in fact not really safe again. Shortly after taking over, a personal friend of mine was in the police in Gweru and had actually witnessed 4 of the black policemen. They had taken the knapsacks that one sprays the tobacco with and had actually filled them with poison. They went on foot with the knapsacks, and as they went from little village to little village, they put these long nostrils into each hut and sprayed the poison. Now, for myself, I was very, very troubled. Arrangements were made then with Joshua Nkoma, and an agreement was signed so that the killings could stop. And a lot of the farmers that had their dairies in that area used to come in and sit with Tony when they came in to buy like their rubberware or whatever parts they wanted done or whatever repairs they wanted done, and they would sit and chat to Tony. Now, an awful lot of them at that particular time, the whites would not stay on the farm at all. They used to go into like the main areas, like perhaps Fort Victoria or maybe Gweru and maybe Bulawayo and that sort of thing, for protection, for safety. The farmers were attacked. Some of them had been murdered. A lot of the homes, they burnt down the African farm workers' quarters and things. They also vandalized the buildings by taking like the window frames out and the roof timbers and door frames and anything that they could put their hands on. And so it left the building completely derelict, and the farmer couldn't go back to stay in his farm. In fact, they were very, very frightened at the time. And many of them, in fact, got killed as they went to their farm gates and things like that. Now, when they were coming in to chat to Tony about the vandalism that was taking place, this is when Tony felt, for our farm now, it was really quite serious. All we had on the farm was just one chap by the name of Justin, and he wasn't a very strong person. But if the Mugabe's ZANU-PF thugs tackled the farm, they would have killed Justin for starters. And Mugabe was using roughly about 50 thugs at that time, tackling each of the farms with all their sickles and so on. Tony had visions of our farm also being vandalised, and I think he was quite troubled. Things just got progressively worse, and it wasn't until after all the killings that had in fact taken place that we realised the extent of the seriousness of the situation that we ourselves found ourselves in regarding the farm. In 81, we had 6 of our prize heifers in calf served by the Canadian bull that we had purchased, and overnight they had just disappeared. So that Tony called the police in, and it seemed as though the head boy in charge of the dairy, he told the police that Dad was lying, that we never lost anything at all, nothing was stolen, it is as it always is. And from that moment, Dad, within the month, had sold all the cattle completely. I think they actually went to Tanzania. And so that is when we actually stopped milking from that moment. And then it's dwindled down. We were just growing our vegetables and things like that. We had chickens, yes. But the whole farming activity actually slowed right down to almost and as good as full stop. Now, our farm was also vacant because it was at that time that Tony realized that we couldn't stay because the stories were horrendous. You know, we actually bought a townhouse because of that, to move in again for the same reason, safety. And I think Tony also visualized that if they had vandalized our farm buildings and home and that, I don't know what we would be. He felt that it was very, very important to try and get some money for it rather than nothing at all. So that is when he elected to put the farm for sale and went to see Mrs. Dawn Taunton, which was Avondale Estates at the time, and put the farm up for sale. She gave him a figure, and it wasn't a very good figure, but I think Tony felt it was better than nothing, and he could just visualize these thugs sort of tearing our place to pieces because we would not be there, and even if we were there, there was a possibility we might have lost our lives. So, and that is what he did. It was the first week of November 1987 when Mrs. Taunton phoned Tony to come into the offices as she had a buyer for the farm. So Tony went along and yes, everything seemed amicable. But the one thing we did not know was the chap signing for the farm was in fact a top person from Mugabe's office. It was one of Mugabe's top CIO chaps. Now, in my honest opinion, as I look back, knowing now exactly how Mugabe has killed off the people and chased the farmers and vandalized their homes, when this chap signed the agreement for the farm, I honestly believe that he had no intention whatsoever of actually paying for it. He wanted it. I mean, it was a very, very nice property and so on. And then shortly after that, that would have been the first week in November 1987. Now, the last week in November 1987, Stephen was arrested. Now, what happened is Stephen was coming home from a braai with his friends on the Jemson Avenue. And as he was driving, he had a beautiful red Cressida. 4 Africans with a white vehicle had pulled over and pulled Stephen off the roads. They flashed their cards and said, "You're under arrest." And they jumped into Stephen's beautiful red Cressida and took him off to the Harare police station. Stephen said that they were absolutely soaked. They were drunk as the Lord with all their beer bottles and everything. They jumped into his car. But when he got to the Harare Central, they then put him into the cells. They made him remove his shoes and said that like the toilets and that were absolutely stinking, had not been cleaned or anything like that. But they interrogated him. He said he was interrogated by 9 different interrogators. They kept changing. This one who got tired, so somebody else would come in and so forth. But they ended up going out to the where the car was. They had actually put the car on like the motor car garages on a lift, and started to tell Stephen that it was the kind used by the Defence Force. And that he was a South African spy, and that he was in the South African Defence Force giving his number, and so on. And when Stephen said to them, "No, you got the wrong person, it's not me," they brought in 4 Africans that said, "Yes, that's him." And that is perhaps when we realized that there was no hope, that they were certainly trying to pin that we were South African spies. Then later that night, they turned up to our house, 2 truckloads, 9 of them, all armed to the teeth, and Stephen in handcuffs. They had no identifications, and they just said emergency regulations, and in they came. They sorted us out from top to bottom. So we then left and went straight through to the British High Commissioner in Harare, and we were there at 9 o'clock in the morning. Now, when they opened the doors, we went in and we put the cards on the table, told them exactly what had happened, and in no time at all they checked to see if Stephen was a mono-British subject, and yes, he was a mono-British, so they said, no, well, he'll have all the protection from us. So they actually contacted the main central office where Stephen was held, and asked them now, why are they holding Stephen? And they didn't answer, but he said to them that unless he's released by 4 o'clock this afternoon, we're going to class it as an international incident. Well, as time went on, we were very upside down. We couldn't settle, and it was the British High Commissioner that actually went down and faced them and said, we want to know now what your charges are on our British national. And at 4 o'clock, they let Stephen go and gave him his papers. And when they gave him his papers, they just said to him, you're lucky that you've got a British passport, he said, because we were going to incinerate you, you bastard. We were very thankful to the British High Commissioner. And when Stephen came home, he was absolutely petrified. He said the stench was absolutely dreadful. Looking back on that now, as time's gone on, I think that this CIO chap that signed the sale agreement, I think his intentions were to lay a charge that we were in fact South African spies, which would have enabled him not only to take the farm for nothing, but to take our home as well for nothing, and also to take stakehold for nothing in everything. They would just confiscate the whole lot from us. But I didn't find that out until a little later. But those were my views on that side of it. And so anyway, he eventually did pay. That would have been October. That's almost a year later, before we got the money.